Welcome, everyone, to our first Impact event of the year, Season of the Witch. My name is Ines de Co, and I'm curator of film and media culture here at IMPAKT. I created this event. Before we start, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's going to happen tonight. I will give a brief tour of the platform that you're currently on, just to show you a little bit of what extras we have to offer. We will kick off the event itself, start with a few presentations, 3 presentations to be precise, discussion. And at this point, I wanted to point out as well that you'll be able to ask questions yourself. You can ask your questions via questions@impact.nl or via the chat below. So let's start. The platform that you're currently on, maybe you've already been able to check it out. My colleague will show it here. So here we are. I'm already starting on the first floor. We have some extra background to look at, a few articles, a podcast by our moderator tonight, and some artworks. I wanted to point out specifically our second floor. We have a selection of video art that is on view for the next coming week. 2 by 2 speakers that are here tonight, Ginevra Petrozzi and Psyx, and 2 by Turkish artist Mayes Ruko and Australian performance artist Naomi Blacklock. I'm very excited that we are able to show these works. Last but not least, on the third floor, we have the Rooftop Bar. After this event, you'll be able to go via this link to a Zoom collective bar where we will all be able to chat informally about what we just saw. And I really hope to see you all there afterwards. Now, to kick off the event, this is part of a platform, Weird Gnosis, that I created with my fellow curator, Mark Tutors. It's an online project about subcultures, esoteric revelations, and the renaissance of psychedelia. For those of you who are interested in witchcraft, I can particularly recommend the works of Juliette Lizotte, Camille Barton, and Agnes Momirski. It responds to the strange and unexpected ways in which we are coping in a world during a profound moment of change. So this collective feeling of deep apprehension. Weird Gnosis suggests that in this world in flux, there are great opportunities as well for change. During a previous Impact festival, we've talked about the language of magic and how it's been used to obfuscate the workings of technology. But here I want to posit a slightly different idea. What if the ancient ways that once helped us navigate a dark, unknowable world can actually help us again? What if it allows us to find new bonds and renew old ones, such as the bonds with our environment? And what if it helps us to find new solidarities? So I think it's time to start. I wanted to introduce you to our moderator tonight, artist, designer, witch, and a very dear friend of mine, Blue Firth. She first introduced me to what at this moment was a very new definition of the witch, and it was mainly about 10 years ago. She's been very influential to this project, so I'm very happy that we have her here tonight. She's a teacher at Nottingham Trent University and works with intuitive design, sustainability, and care. For further listening on the topic of witchcraft, I would very much recommend her podcast, The Common Craft. Blue is a nature witch, but she will approach the topic of digital witchcraft with the necessary curiosity that will help guide us all. So, welcome, Blue.
Hi. Thank you, Ines. Thank you so much. That was such a lovely introduction. I mean, you've just given such a good introduction, so I'm not going to say much more about myself, but I do think it's quite helpful to sort of suggest where I'm coming from when we talk about the word witchcraft and what that actually means to me on a sort of day-to-day basis and personal professional life. So quickly, I have to write everything down. I get quite nervous at these events, but I use witchcraft as a practice, necessarily like daily practice. Also, I use the cycles of nature in the year daily for myself and in my own work. And I think the most important words for me are care, accountability, and magic, and how I can use what I'm defining as witchcraft for myself as a structure to exist within that, using those kind of words. And you said, I'm a sort of a nature witch. So this idea of blending witchcraft with digital technologies and digital practices is something which I haven't spent a huge amount of time using in my own practice. But as witchcraft is a practice, and practice being the operative word, it is ever changing and ever shifting the whole time. So it's really exciting that we'll be talking about a kind of, for me and maybe some of the audience and maybe not, how the shifting nature of the digital landscape fits with the shifting nature of the witch, as it's always changed throughout history. I hope that has not rambled on for too long. I will begin by introducing Danae Tapia, our first speaker tonight. Danae is a writer, a multimedia artist, and a technologist born in the Chilean working class. She is a researcher and lecturer of hacking and autonomous practices at the Willem de Kooning Academy in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. She is a founder of the Digital Witchcraft Institute, an organisation dedicated to perform artistic research at the intersection of technology and the supernatural. Wow, just that last sentence is so wonderfully exciting. But let's first kick off then with Danae and her presentation.
Hello, thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, my name is Danae. I cannot see my slides. I don't know if, there it is. Thank you, Manon. Thanks for the invitation, Ines, and everyone at IMPAKT. Yes, and today I wanted to do a brief introduction to my work, and I use this title to this provocation I want to share with you today: Digital Witchcraft, a Materialist Challenge. But first, I'd like to share some of the motivations to found the Digital Witchcraft Institute, this arts organization that is doing interesting things in the Netherlands. This started after a generous fellowship I had with the Mozilla Foundation. I was able to travel the world and explore connections between uses of technology, mostly in non-Western contexts, and matters of the supernatural. I did research on Cuban Santeria and Cuban hackers. I went to Kyoto and met an android who gave lectures on Buddhism. And that was a very amazing experience. And I was trying to search for radical alternatives for the issues that I was working on regarding digital culture. I was kind of disappointed by the activism I was doing in matters of cyberfeminism, piracy, hacking. I thought that things weren't, radical enough. And I thought about witchcraft to find this concept that I call sacred interoperability. This is the moment in which two interfaces can conversate in a smooth way. This interface is being technology and the supernatural. So I started doing academic research at Utrecht University, where I was studying. I did this comparative research on the figures of the hacker and the shaman. This image in the presentation is a still from a video clip I made, overlapping the images from a hacker conference and images from a shamanic ritual. I used ethnographies to compare these both groups and was amazed by the many occult features that hacking communities use. I started like this, but then I moved to this other. I expanded this into this path, which starts as this comparative research between computer science and religious studies. Then I extended it to exercises of speculation using magical traditions to design advanced technologies. And then I started experimenting with actual instances of digital witchcraft. These are outputs of a bot I made For example, with my friend Annika Kapner, visual artist, we've been doing a series of workshops to create oracle bots, and these are the outputs of my personal oracle. The text is borrowed from a corpus of my dream journaling, and every 3 hours it posts this oracular phrases that the world sees. And now this oracle is still posting this divinatory outputs. The image behind is formed after a set of coordinates that Shirin Fahimi, Iranian artist, gave me after a geomancy ritual. So I see this is an example of how I see automated tech as a method that opens doors to the unknown. Another example of digital witchcraft work that I do is 22 Mirrors. This time it's a work of literature that I do with writer Ginevra Petrozzi. And again, we try to access the unknown by identifying 22 arcana, archetypical forces that play a crucial role in the current climate crisis. So this is also going to be a bot, and this is also hopefully opening doors to things we are not really knowing with the use of tech. However, I have this problem now after all these years working on digital witchcraft from year 2018. Now I start to think that it became a bit of a middle class trend, and it's something that is bothering me a lot at the moment. It's weird to see like people from elite backgrounds claiming to be witches, academia favoring the witchery approach, and I don't know. As a person from the working class, I started to feel a bit skeptical about or suspicious about everything that's happening now. I started to become disappointed as well by this speculative approach that I was also using. For example, this image is a prototype with a group of people we did in a workshop I led. And so yeah, my suspicion now is that this might be starting to become an example of capitalistic logics co-opting the concept of witchcraft. And this, of course, has the problem of the subsequent problem of having little impact in reality. However, I think that it's not all a doomy feeling. I think that it is possible that we can propose a relation between magic and materialism. I think that it's possible to propose a materialist framework to think about witchcraft. For this, I still think that it's very relevant the work of Silvia Federici. Here's an image of his foundational book, Caliban and the Witch, in which she states that witches were empiricists, not magical special beings with a divine right. She explains that when witches were working with herbs, that was a scientific work. Also, the idea of magic as a tool for community use. There's some examples in Caliban and the Witch on how it was very normal to not going to work in the Middle Ages because you claimed that a ghost entered your body, and the community agreed. I also see in my own syncretic upbringing in acts of like giving the earth a year of rest and not exploit the earth all the time. That's an empiricist, but also a magical approach as well. I think this is possible. It's possible to think of materialist witchcraft as long as we use a Marxist framework in which we identify those with power and the powerless. That's the key for me. At the moment it happened, witch hunting was politically motivated because organized women compromised the dominant structure, and that's why they were killed. So I want to finish this with this question: Who are the witches now? because I don't think that maybe that witchcraft is a concept that scares the powerful anymore. I see liberal feminism appropriating the witchcraft language. You can go to, I don't know, Urban Outfitters and buy tarot decks and shirts with a pentagram. That's even this event demonstrates that official institutions have no longer trouble accepting witchcraft as a valid topic to study. So I think witches are elsewhere. I don't know where they are, or maybe I do know, but I cannot name them. But I want to ask this question in this event. This is my presentation. Thank you. I hope you don't see this as a cynical perspective. This is something that really comes from my desire for revolution and the true access to the unknown. But yes, who are the witches? Who are those we cannot name? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danae. I'm just bursting with so many things that I want to ask you, but I must refrain, and we must save it for discussion at the end. I'm sure I'm not the only one. But that is such an amazing way to end that with that question, who are the witches now? So I hope that kind of resonates and sits in people's minds whilst we move on to our next speaker. So next up, we have Ginevra Petrozzi. She is a designer, artist and practicing witch, currently living and working in the Netherlands. She works, creates and performs magic engaging with technologies, restructuring diverse relationships between non-human and human beings. Currently, she is exploring the possibilities of occult practices within the landscape of contemporary technopolitics. In this framework, she took the role of digital witch, reclaiming the archetypal role of the sorceress as a healer and as a political rebel for digital care. Using installation, performance, video and witchcraft, Petrozzi aims to reshape the way in which the digital and physical realm inform and influence each other. So Ginevra, next up to you, please.
Thank you so much for this introduction. So my name is Ginevra, and thank you also to Danae for the amazing presentation she did. And I also have many questions to ask her, and try to work together to the final one. So I could start by showing you my presentation. Yeah. So as I already said, slide. Yeah. So my name is Ginevra. I was born in Rome, and I'm a designer and researcher currently based in Rotterdam. And mainly interest is work for creating magic through the eyes of technology, but especially through the concept of I navigate, from a specific position, which I think it's important to mention, which is my understanding of magic, of course, and that is closely linked to the experience of my family's history, to the history of Italian magic, specifically its rules and its traditions. I recently graduated from the Eindhoven from social design master with a project called Digital Esoterism. And this project really symbolized for me the beginning of my real practice. Digital Esoterism is a performance and an institution, but above a year-long research around the possibility of reclaiming ancient divinatory practices, so to foresee the future in the current political landscape and to understand how our vision of the future changed. So these are some examples of Pythia, Oracle of Delphi, Tarot, Geomancy, which serve me to explain a concept that is the kind of it to the being. So in a world governed inexplicable forces where everything had to make sense in a fate-like system, magic and divination actually served as remedies to the opacity of fate. And if one couldn't change it, at least be prepared. And divination offered the technique to do so. So my claim with digital is in fact that the future never really escaped fate, and that we are living by surveillance capitalism, big data, and algorithms become the new fate makers, depriving the future of its open possibilities. And it is the capacity and future that gets debilitated. I'm sorry, they are saying that's super strong. Is this... No. Let's see, let's try to continue. So coming back to magic and to divination, they always provided a way to disenfranchise oneself from institutionalized power and control. And I wanted to reclaim these practices to rebel and heal from the modern technological structures of control. So I have been studying for 4 years now. I decided they were going to let say guide me through this project and through my and in the beginning it was just me and the cards, and I read the cards and I spent 3 months without really knowing what I was doing, and just trying to listen whoever wanted to question the uncertainty of the future with me. Things slowly emerged with the screen of the smartphone, and the similarities were uncanny. So operating through mysterious processes, predicting the future, only an expert could control them, changing the way they would behave in the present, and sometimes scary for how accurate they were. So I decided to read into these algorithmic predictions, which materialize as targeted advertising, suggested posts, suggested Spotify songs, even the predictive keyboard of the smartphone, using the same methodologies and structures of a tarot reading. And as a designer, I constructed the space in which this practice could take place. So the space of a digital witch that would have this accept all sign, which would mark a magic contract with the querent by entering accept my terms and conditions. And that, of course, is also the possibility to end the reading at any moment or to not show me something. And the entrance is really important to remind the viewer of the consequences, but also the rights that they have in the digital realm. Also, the candles and candle holder that I produced trace back to Catholic churches, which in Italian magic is strictly connected to the tradition, and candle rituals, but also the ability of candles in many cultures of connecting to the invisible. And in my installation, the candles are directly speaking of digital devices taking their shape, and that's where they actually operate. Then, using the embroidery on the tablecloth, the querent moves the smartphone onto the various positions based on the thread, and the reading starts starts by choosing a platform or space in the phone that produces automated predictions and that could give more insights about the querent. The difference, of course, is that a tarot reader is the expert on the deck, but in my readings, the querent is actually the person that is the expert on their own smartphones and their own algorithm. Therefore, the reading is more a negotiation of meaning, and my role is merely the one of the translator. So I had the chance to perform readings in many occasions, such as Dutch Design Week, or in Muuspace, in Waag, and Raum in Utrecht as well. And the great thing is that readings change through reading. So every time the algorithm also modifies and we try to interpret it in a different way. Then the witch has always been the archetype of the wise person, the healer, the conjurer as well, and the political rebel. And in the current political landscape, it is a very needed that brings back the past and the future, the manipulation of elements and the connection to the surroundings. And becoming a digital witch meant to rebel in some ways to the way algorithms are intended to work for us, and to repurpose them as self-reflective tools, but also to change the way they were supposed to be used by us, the users. So giving it a new meaning and providing an act of care and rebellion at the same time, because I think that tarot readings are also an act of care in many ways. So just very quickly, I just wanted to show other projects in which I tried to experiment with the digital witchcraft. In this very small short workshop, I tried together with a group of participants in residence to read tarot to the most famous conversational AI machine, and the results were very interesting, and we talked about the figure of justice and an empress, and it was just the first tryout in the observation of how a new prediction system would react to an ancient one. And then in this case, it was about amulets, coming back to amulet because they're very present in my craft, but also in Italian magic. And during the Facebook outage this October 2021, when for 7 hours, more or less, digital users realized that all of their data could have been cancelled forever, I created these two meta talismans, and there are 3D objects that could be brought to the screen of the computer. And they work as traditional apotropaic charms. So the shape of the vase suggests that the vessel would contain, therefore clear, the digital device from unwanted forces such as viruses, trolls, analytics, or another outage, for example. And the last thing I wanted to show you is the possibility I had in Muuspace in Eindhoven to transform my project, which are one-to-one conversations, into a workshop. And I was able to guide a group of people into reading their own advertising. And at the beginning of the workshop, we entered into a casted circle in which for each element there was something representing fire, water, air, for the very cardinal signs. And we scanned our phones with rosebuds and laurel to bury inside of a vase, which was part of the closing ritual with this amazing group. And as a final slide, let's say, I just wanted to re-say that I think it's terribly important nowadays to understand reality through different types of measurements. to disentitle the scientific method to the concept of only truth or only valid experience, and taking back the archetype of the witch and magic practices is my attempt to both re-enchant a technical reality, but also re-experience magic as a political tool against systems of control perpetrated in the digital realm. And this is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm just like chomping at the bit with excitement and so many questions, and what an incredibly beautiful but provocative practice. Thank you very much. So we have one more speaker this evening, which we'll move on to now. Psyx is a Black queer non-binary storyteller and cyber witch merging sound, video, art, installation and performance. Their practice is grounded in the art of synthesis, truth generation and sound generation, which is used to create portals that may aid us in exploring Black queer futures and abolitionist possibilities. Fusing art and technology with the practice of witchcraft, they use spells, rituals and alchemic practices as modes of activation. Sai, you are up next.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Psyx, also known as CyberWitch666. And for the past 3 years, I've been discovering what a cyberwitch is and can be. I, in a way, decided to be one before I fully knew what that meant, and perhaps that was a spell in and of itself. I knew that I was a witch, but how could I grow to understand that identity alongside the digital realm? Thinking about what led me there, and this is where you pull up my slides. Perhaps it was a time around when I tweeted this, which was on May 8th, 2018, a moment I considered to be, in a way, my cyberwitch initiation. And here, an initiation is the moment in which I realized the world wasn't quite what I thought it was. And I had had other initiations before, especially around gender and sexuality and how those shifted my understanding of the world. But this specific tweet, in which I tweeted, "How long will my Black body be watched, consumed, retweeted after I die?" This one made me reflect on technology and digital worlds in ways that I hadn't before. And this question was hinting at a certain anxiety around my own imagery and its relation to death, particularly due to Black death imagery that was circulating on social media on every feed I was on at the time. At that point, for months, I had been confronted with death, like the video of Stephen Clark, who was murdered by police in Sacramento, California, and was reminded of all the other videos I had seen, reposted, tweeted, and nudged in between selfies and Instagram stories. Without warning, I was forced to confront my own death, both impending and current. And I began to wonder, why must we circulate these images of murders and violent killings in order for people to believe that Black Lives Matter? I imagine that no one could have predicted the impending virality of their deaths, or more specifically, their images, their multiplicity condensed into imagery, pixels that were used as a process towards supposed change. If one way of thinking about magic is thinking of how the inner realms can affect the outer realms, I too became curious about how the digital realms can affect this material one, and if these things were distinct realms at all. These curiosities have guided me toward the creations of portals and maps, and you can show my slides for those. And toward the creation of zines and written code to create intentional glitches, and sound, video, and performance work using the art of synthesis and energy work as tools of divination. I relate to magic as being many things, from perhaps moments of supreme wonder and curiosity that bring you closer to something beyond the self. I also relate to it as power, currency, communication, and deep listening. And at its root, I believe it to be about intention and change. As someone who also works closely with the earth as an herbalist and an earth tender, particularly looking at how we can cultivate relationships with our technology, just like as an herbalist, I've worked to cultivate relationships with plants and the earth around me. I'm looking at magic also as technology in and of itself, perhaps one of the oldest forms. And I'm also curious how we can look at our emerging technologies as also being earth-based ones and moving away from the distinction of what is natural and what isn't, what is technology and what isn't. Perhaps these boundaries are a bit more fluid than we previously have thought. And I'm also interested in relating to our older technologies and emerging ones from an animist perspective, believing that life force flows through everything. Perhaps it's also flowing through the screen, from my phone, from my laptop. How can this perspective, one that is steeped in deep listening, one that is relational, and one that moves beyond human-centered ideology, offer new frameworks of being that move beyond fear and offer new methods of entry for those who have been systemically erased and harmed in a multitude of other capitalist tech spaces? And so that's my approach, my curiosity, and my question for you all. Thank you.
I'm sort of profoundly inspired by your kind of beautifully succinct and sort of, it just happened so quickly, all the words that you were just saying that just have, I need a moment for them to settle. But what I think is so wonderful and something that chimed with me immediately was that you started your talk saying that you began discovering what being a digital witch would mean to you in the last 3 years, having already had a witchcraft practice. And that's something that chimed with me over all three of you as speakers, how you accessed the unknown by using the digital realm in all many different ways, by using that as a tool. And I think first question to you, can I get a question first? I'm going to just jump in and say, can I start with some questions? I'm sure that there are audience members who cannot wait to ask questions too. Inez.
Yeah, there are two questions from the audience. I just wanted to say for anyone still, really wanting to ask a question, it's via email or via the chat below. I have a question from Pauline Panetta. How do you suggest middle-class people relate to witchcraft in a revolutionary effort? My guess is this is for Danae.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Of course, yes. How do you suggest middle-class people relate to witchcraft in a revolutionary effort?
Yeah, it's strange. I really don't. I think what I try to present is this problem in which structures of power co-opt the witchcraft practice and the witchcraft discourse. I see a revolution in the witchcraft practice, and it can, and all society is transversal to all society, in this vision I have in which magic starts to exist as a pervasive, omniscient part of the entire reality that is not necessarily divided by classes. In relation to that, I think it's very relevant, the work of Federico Campagna and his book Technique and Magic, in which he compares this entire environment of technology in which we inhabit right now and the magical traits of it. So in this magical world, in this re-enchanted world, class divisions, I guess sure still exist, but it's not really the central issue of it. I'm more concerned, I guess, when I see businesses and institutions appropriating the witchcraft discourse rather than individuals in particular.
Thank you. I have one more question. There's a question by Natalia Sanchez, who would love to hear more about tarot cards relating to climate change.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this project. I went to Glasgow to the COP26 summit to do some field work about it. And I'm inspired by Alejandro Jodorowsky's tarot work. He's a Chilean artist, major reference. And he used this in his tarot manual. He used this literary technique of talking as the arcana, as the wheel of fortune, as temperance, as the magician. What I did with Javier Bertozzi, fellow writer, was to identify archetypical forces that play a role in the climate emergency that we're going through right now. We identified archetypes such as capital, as the cow, as extinction, as depression, and we incarnated those arcana. That's something that I think I do when I read the tarot. That's also related, I guess, to Jungian psychology. And I think that I related to the problem of climate change because I think it's an issue that has to be addressed in a holistic way. And I thought that this arcana format was very convenient for that. This project is not yet launched, but it's going to be launched very soon, and it will be good to use the tarot format and the tarot narratives to find exits to this planetary problem.
Thank you.
I would love to just ask Sai and Ginevra, what thinking about archetypes, which is something which you all kind of alluded to, and thank you, Danae, you've just sort of given your aspects on archetypes. We've looked at the tarot. The tarot has appeared in both of your practices, and the tarot is something which is this, so accessible to everybody with its old problematic archetypes. So, Sai and Ginevra, what would your kind of new archetypes be, if that is something that you could, give us a little bit more on, if that makes any sense.
Sai, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious how to think about that. So I'm thinking of like the tarot as an archetype. What would be, I guess, our own sorts of tool sets that we might use in our practice? Is that the question?
Yeah, or trying to rethink the classic archetypes that are so problematic, yet we use them as a system all the time and then have to reinterpret them through a kind of contemporary lens. And depending on your practice or your background. So I'm just really excited about this idea of like other archetypes that would be more beneficial for us to be using now. What the possibilities of those could be. So seeing it from a kind of climate crisis aspect, I wondered if you had any others that sprang to mind. But I am putting you on the spot. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. I'm thinking of archetypes, and I feel like something that you're hinting at is that there are these archetypes that already exist, that have been around for some times, that maybe are being questioned or problematized in certain ways. And I think especially as I have been navigating my practice, it's been really important to think about the tools that I gravitate towards or use and why and what their background is. And so I personally don't really use the tarot as much, but something that I can sort of relate to as maybe an archetype that I use is synthesis, and especially as someone who works with sound a lot and synthesizers and sampling and different sorts of other sonic practices, I really relate to synthesis, which is this way of generating sound from electricity and being able to like shift and mold that sound and create something that is exponentially different than where it began. And so I relate to that as an archetype and a tool that I use in my own process of thinking of how you can mold and shape and shift something that can be not as simple. Electricity is like a huge, powerful invention, but how you can shape that and use that vibrational energy in new ways to bring you towards new realities. And so I relate to synthesis in that way. And I also think about it in terms of like ideas around truth, and also the systems that we do or don't believe in. And so thinking of also synthesis as a way of negotiating and confronting our truths and beliefs in those belief systems.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
For me, I would say that in the digital readings, normally what becomes the new arcana is every prediction that one's smartphone may produce. No, so actually it's completely the opposite of archetypes, because it's ever changing, and it actually could happen that you receive a certain algorithmic prediction but never see it again. And you'd really have to trust your algorithm to find it back. But in a certain way, so this is one aspect. I feel like in the digital realm now, archetypes are ever changing, and the more actually, the better, because we feed our algorithm with our information, then us changing also changes the way the algorithm behaves with us. But in a way, when I look at the digital realm, I also can recognize some new archetypes that actually I would love to research more around. For example, just a very specific concept that now have come to reality, like the archetype of the virus, which is not only in the digital realm, of course, and we have been seeing this very clearly, or the archetype of the troll as the invader or the intruder, or the shitstorm, for example, which could remind me of the arcana of the tower, in which everything goes down, crumbling down under the weight of superbia or hubris. So I think there's a lot to reconnect, and we can use old archetypes and arcana to reconnect to them, but also I think there are some new ones, and it's not necessary to make connections. It's need also to disentangle a bit from the way classical tarot maybe is constructed.
There have been a few questions coming in from the audience again. Was there something you wanted to say, Blue?
I've got so much. There's so much I want to say. I just think it's quite. Can I just round that off? I guess it's, for so many people, an access point to witchcraft is the tarot, because it is so readily accessible. So I think it's just really exciting to hear you all speak about what tools to use, what the appropriate tools are for our time, and questioning these old archetypes. Because yes, you can go out and buy a deck, but and read its kind of quintessential historical little book and kind of read in that sense, but they really need to be shaken up, and they really need to be questioned, and they really need to be shifted and changed, like the archetype of the witch is shifting. So everything that I've just heard is just fabulous and mind-blowing and beautiful, and I just think, if this is the new archetypes that we're working with, I'm very positive. it feels good. Thank you.
I have a question from Giada Lagala. It's a question to Ginevra, and I think it is also because you had some technical difficulties during your presentation, so not all of it was heard. No, it happens. But her question is, I was really curious how you translate advertisements into tarot cards, but couldn't get it before. Could you say something more about it?
So, since the whole practice came on in a very spontaneous way, I never really put rules on how to read advertising or predictions as tarot cards. So it came very organically in a way that I was studying tarot for a lot of years. Then I decided to use them for my project, for my process. I asked to the cards how I should use them in the proper way. And what I've received as an answer was that I needed, yet that I could use, but that I needed to make them into something new. So that was always my aim. And this is also why I didn't want to make a new deck, but really to change the way in which I could read something. So then I applied the methodology above all of tarots and the spread, so how the positions of the cards. Then the person that is the querent brings their phone, and we choose a platform or a space in the phone that produces automated predictions, which could be LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, suggested songs from Spotify, or even the automated, the predictive keyboard of your smartphone. And then we position it on the table as the position is requiring. So in a past, present, future spread, we would move the phone for 3 times, so like in past, present, and then future. And then we will read each prediction in that framework. So for example, if one person would receive an advertising of the shoe, then we would start to analyze the personal symbology behind the shoe for that person, and specifically in the past, so maybe past events and how they have influenced your present condition. But then, of course, they are not static, and this is the exciting part, I think, because for the next person who will receive a shoes advertising, they will mean something completely different. So actually what I bring to the table to the interpretation is how I know how to read cards and what tarots teach. So understanding symbols and projecting, and also understanding patterns. So this is why it's always, like I say, I am a translator in this, because it's always a negotiation of this meaning with the person that comes to the table.
Thank you. I have a question from Gewoon Yoon, I guess. They say, I was inspired when Psyx talked about herbalism and the similarities between your approach to technology and nature. How did you start your herbalism journey?
Yeah. I feel like there are many different beginnings, but honestly, I was in grad school and graduated in May. But while I was there, I was sort of just shocked by how much the world around us was ignored. There was sort of like definitely an interest and preoccupation around these new technologies and new frameworks, but a sort of wide scale kind of just avoiding the earth, anything related to plants, just like that world just didn't exist. The earth around us didn't exist. And I have always sort of had to feel like I negotiated sort of my interest in technology and also my interest in plants and gardening and things that seemed like maybe they were opposites or at odds with each other. And then while I was moving through my grad program, I became interested in sort of listening to that calling of being interested in plants, being interested in learning more about the earth. And so I started to take a few classes last February. And it's been such a great journey. And I think one thing that I have sort of been able to learn through that is that these things are not actually polar opposites. They actually do inform and interact and are related in so many ways. And a big part of my work now has been to sort of just like find the ways that these things are related and communicate about that broadly. And so there isn't this whole, I think, ignoring of the earth, and what's in the earth, what's on the earth, and also understanding that these technologies that we have, they do exist on this earth, and many of them are also made from the earth, and also earth-based divination processes are also a part of our technology now. And so making those connections has been really really helpful for me, and has been helpful for my journey as I'm learning more about plants, but also as I'm going deeper into technology.
I love that idea. When we were having a discussion beforehand, Blue and I were talking about this, how witchcraft manipulates the environment or works with its environment. And traditionally, this was nature, but now we can put technology in the same spot, perhaps as a way. It's just our natural environment. We can't really go around it. And I think, you really hit the nail on the head there. I have a question here, which I quite like, and it's not directed to anyone in particular, but maybe you can, anyone who is particularly inspired can answer it. It's by Carmen Schwering, who asks, I always felt that spirituality and digital technology could not be unified. I always hide my devices when I meditate. Do you believe that devices disrupt the flow of energy or not necessarily?
I think they do. I don't know. Sometimes when you are in a truth, in a sense, in I don't know, having ayahuasca in the mountains, sometimes that you don't think about your cell phone. And I think I wanted to say something maybe connected to what we were discussing before, that there is a problem in technology that lots developers are trying to use software, AI, to translate like the weirdness of the world into standardized results. And it's a mistake when we use, in my opinion, when we use technology like that. And it will be a mistake to translate spirituality and the unknown and the supernatural into an output of an app or anything. The key, in my opinion, is to use technology to make things even more weirder than they were in the first place. The mistake, in my opinion, is to try to find like definite standard answers through tech device. It's spirituality and technology can coexist as long as technology expands the what is ungraspable.
Yeah, I feel in a similar way. But I also wanted to reconnect to what Sai was saying, because I feel like I want, in some cases, to include, for example, my phone or the computer, or in a circle I cast a printer, because it helps me to something that was materially impossible to bring in a circle, to scan my phone with herbs and to have it in a photograph right away. I feel like in that case machines really add, and I feel like they also need blessings sometimes, like this is how I feel with machines a lot of time. So I think when you try to maybe translate like what could be made perfectly in a physical analogical way into digital way, sometimes a bit cranky. Like I also tried a tarot app that would give me a random card maybe in the morning. It's not the same. But in a way, when I try to when we try to include machines, technology, or digital mechanisms into our practice, I feel like in some way we are delivering some energy also to the machines, and I really feel like sometimes they add. But it's true that it's tricky. It's tricky, but they can be part of circles or energy things that we do, or help get in touch with the unknown, if not producing it, I think. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this is such a interesting question, and one that I've thought about. So I guess my answer to the original question would be that it's not that machines necessarily disrupt the energy. I think it's just sort of like kind of like you have to relate to like the energy of like each individual thing. Like the energy of a rock is very different than the energy of a computer and of our devices. And the reasons why we might relate to our devices and technology as being disrupting definitely has to do with some of the ways that they have been designed, the things that might be on the devices, certain apps, our attachments to those apps, our relationships to them. A lot of apps have algorithms on them, and I think like the energy of an algorithm is like a very specific thing where an algorithm is always hungry, always pulling you in, always wants more information, and it's always growing and it's very expansive. And that can be a really amazing thing, but also maybe if you're not trying to move energetically in that direction, that can be distracting. And so I think it's really important to relate to things based off of how they are, how their energy is, how they function, what they need, how they exist with you in a different room. Just sort of like we relate to different people. There's certain people I probably couldn't meditate with because they might be distracting. And so sort of just understanding, I guess, like each energetic disposition of the things around us that we already sort of do, but also taking that a step further with our technology and our devices can sort of help us answer that question on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks. I have one more question by Ja Ade for Psyx. How does your relationship with ceremony show up when you use technology?
Yeah, I love that question. I feel like there's a lot of different cases of how ceremony shows up. Especially because we've been in this pandemic, I've been performing a lot over Zoom, and so I have my own sort of ceremony practices that are related to that. And also when I was in class a lot and having a hard time focusing on Zoom, I had different practices related to that. And so oftentimes I would actually build an altar that would be next to my computer that I would have when I was in classes back to back, and that really helped with my focus. And so I would have different things like a candle, different things that sort of like helped me shift into that energetic mindset. And also with performances, I also will do a performative altar that I'll have also in my performance space. And so I have that aspect of that as well. Cleansing shows up as well. So on my like desk space, oftentimes going through that process of cleansing, removing what doesn't need to be there, what could be distracting. I'll also do that. And just really having the space that I'm using my devices be sort of only use in that case. And so like not actually using my computer at my desk, for instance, and not in my bed or in another room where that energy might flow. And so there's different sorts of practices that I use like that. But I would say the ceremonial aspects definitely show up a bit more in my performances, especially because I am often using either my computer or other devices that are parts of my performances, and that sort of maybe looks a bit more ceremonial, but I do have ritual practices that I do as well, sort of on the daily for upkeep.
Thank you. Yeah, we're almost pretty much out of time. I just wanted to end with one last, I don't know, proposal, I guess. But I really loved earlier what you said, Danae, that it is necessary, obviously, to remain very critical of technology and not get lost in a sort of mystification of what it is that we have here. And for that reason, I think, I don't know, for me, I think it's helpful that when we think of energies in machines, that we think of the humans who created them, and especially for algorithms, they're still, subject to human fallibility as well, and power relations that are replicated, obviously. So yeah, they are not divine creatures in that sense. Yeah. I don't know. That was my little small addition here. I think we have to round it off. I'm afraid, but I'm sure there's so much more that we can say about this topic. It provokes a lot of questions for everyone, and I think there's a lot of discussions that still need to be had. We can meet in the Rooftop Bar, which is a Zoom Rooftop Bar at the moment, but I really do hope that we can all chat a little bit further there. So I would like to thank all of our speakers, Danae, Sai, and Ginevra, and our moderator, Blue, for being here tonight and for sharing your beautiful practices. I'm very happy that we could have this short but very relevant discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.